Martin, we good to go? Okay. Bonjour, shalom, good morning. 77 years ago, the man who became our dad, Paul Orbach, was liberated by the Americans from Auschwitz-Birkenau. He was 18. He weighed 60 pounds, and his parents and sister, Maja, had been murdered. If the late, great Rabbi, Bulka, were here with us today, I'm sure he would tell us something about the word remember. Originally from the Latin memor, it meant mindful. Later, rememorare meant call to mind. Et après, en français, remembrer, devenu, back to the original place. And so we gather here to commemorate that original place and time when 6 million Jews died in the Holocaust and to honor those who survived. Je voudrais dire une chaleureuse bienvenue aux tous qui sont ici avec nous pour commémorer et honorer les 6 millions juifs et les survivantes. Thank you for being here on Yom HaShoah as we call to mind the most significant day for National Holocaust remembrance and as we reach out to youth in our community. On behalf of the National Holocaust Monument Committee, we sometimes refer to ourselves, bienvenue. We sometimes refer to ourselves as the monumental team. I want to begin by acknowledging our many supporters, supporting organization partners, Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs, CIJA, the Jewish Federation of Ottawa, Toby Nussbaum, don't make that mistake twice, Toby Nussbaum and the National Capital Commission, Heritage Canada, Center for Holocaust Education, CHES, Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Center, the Embassy of Israel, the Canadian Society for Yad Vashem, and the Azrieli Foundation. Merci pour votre appui et participation. I want to recognize and welcome our invited guests, including many ambassadors, military attachés, members of parliament, Deputy Mayor Derouz, the leader of the Bloc Québécois, Yves-François Blanchet, senators, members of parliament, I think I may have already mentioned you, but you're worth a second mention for sure, and guests. Also, we have with us today 100 students from the Torah Day School and Ottawa Jewish Community Schools and the Tamir Community Choir. But most importantly, we have our very special guests, our Holocaust survivors. Ellie Balgroff, David Moskovich, Ruth Katz, Judy Young-Drach, Vera Gara, and Dr. Agnes Klein. Now, our speakers will be individually introduced shortly. I want to invite, if she is here, Elder Claudette Commanda. Is she present? She didn't make it today. Well, we're going to have to either wait for her. When she gets here, we'll do the blessing. Claudette Commanda is the granddaughter of the great wampum belts keeper William Commanda. She's from the Kitigan Zibi Anishinabeg tribe, and she has been with us on previous occasions at this National Holocaust Monument to bless to bless where we are. I want to then invite Shimon Koffler, Fogel, President and Chief Executive Officer, Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs, to make remarks and to introduce the Prime Minister. Shimon.
Merci, Lawrence. Je reconnais aussi évidemment que nous marquons aujourd'hui cette occasion solennelle sur un territoire non cédé de la nation algonquine Anishinaabe. Chers amis, as we join together in commemoration of Yom HaShoah, I cannot help but reflect on the concept of paradoxes. and how they touch virtually every aspect of our experience. Thinking about this reality is not comfortable. Indeed, in some respects, it's painful and distressing. On this day, the Jewish world gathers to mourn, to remember fully 1/3 of our people, 6 million innocent souls, murdered only because they were Jews. But we do so in the company of others. The presence of so many parliamentarians from all sides of the House, distinguished diplomatic representatives of numerous countries, as well as ethnic and faith community leaders. So we grieve, but we do so surrounded and comforted by good people, incluant des députés du Bloc québécois. Permettez-moi de rappeler avec remerciement que la jeunesse de cet événement annuel statutaire provient des efforts d'un ancien député du Bloc, Richard Marceau, avec qui j'ai maintenant le plaisir de travailler au sein de CIJA. Paradoxes. On the one hand, we ritualistically remember the past, while forced to confront the reality that there are those who continue in their attempt to erase the lived Jewish experience. Saving us from despair are the sincere efforts of individuals like Kevin Waugh, who introduced legislation to protect the memory and legacy of the Holocaust. In that regard, we also seize this opportunity to express deep appreciation to the Government of Canada for being so responsive to our call at last summer's emergency summit on antisemitism, which earlier this month introduced legislation to criminalize Holocaust denial and its trivialization. Paradoxes. We give voice to the cry never again, yet witness continued barbarity around the world. Never again was born out of the Jewish experience, but was always intended to be universal in its application. How can we witness the atrocities visited on the Rohingya, the Uyghurs, or the Yazidi, and claim the cry of never again has meaning? How can we observe the unvarnished aggression against Ukraine and assert we have taken the lessons of the Holocaust to heart? We derive hope because our collective response has been different, and the imperative of the St. Louis has been internalized. We have hope because Canada, a place of refuge granted to my parents, child survivors of the Holocaust more than 60 years ago, is now the place where fleeing Syrian and Iraqi refugees can rebuild their lives, where desperate Afghani women and girls can fulfill their dreams, where displaced, war-torn Ukrainians can find safe harbor. Paradoxes. Out of the ashes of the Holocaust emerged the realization of a 2,000-year-old dream of the rebirth of the Jewish homeland, which, like all nations, may be imperfect, yet still serves as a shining light of democracy, inclusion, and diversity. Sadly, although the State of Israel, which is at the core of Jewish identity and serves as the proxy for the Jewish people, is still rejected and deemed illegitimate by those who ironically stand to gain most by its acceptance, and notwithstanding that Israel is relentlessly vilified by their supporters who gather at hate fests like the Al-Quds rallies that will be on course display this weekend. We behold a new and exciting era as Arab and Muslim states embrace their Jewish neighbor and forge a shared and promising future. That gives us hope. Let us then give true meaning to this day. let us here and now renew our pledge of never again. Let us redouble our efforts to stand with, defend, and protect the vulnerable, the oppressed, and the targets of hate. Let us transform words into deeds, and through that, honor the memories of those who have perished. J'ai maintenant l'honneur d'inviter le Premier ministre au trône. Alors que vous faites votre chemin, permettez-moi de vous exprimer notre plus profonde appréciation pour l'appui sans équivoque que vous avez démontré envers la communauté juive du Canada, pour la concrétisation de vos engagements contre l'antisémitisme, de la lutte contre la haine en ligne et l'amélioration de la sécurité de la communauté juive et des autres communautés à risque dans notre pays si unique et si spécial. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Right Honourable Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Shimon, for your introduction. Thank you for the land acknowledgement as well. We are on unceded Algonquin territory. I'm glad to be joined by Ambassador Hoffman from Israel, and I see many, many other colleagues and friends here today across the political spectrum where we gather in person once again to mark Yom HaShoah here at the National Holocaust Monument. This is a somber space for reflection and remembrance of victims of the Holocaust. And I'm grateful we can all be here together for this event. Every year, we commemorate Yom HaShoah so that we do not forget the 6 million Jews who were systematically and senselessly murdered during the Holocaust. 6 millions de mères, de pères, de sœurs, de frères, de grands-parents et d'enfants perdus il y a de cela 8 décennies. La Shoah a été l'une des périodes les plus sombres de l'histoire de l'humanité. Depuis, les survivants et les témoins ont raconté leur histoire pour que cette tragédie ne soit pas oubliée et qu'elle ne se reproduise plus jamais. As new generations form their understanding of the world, we must make sure that the lessons of the Holocaust do not go untold. We must continue to confront antisemitism, hatred, and intolerance in all its forms. Earlier this year, our country and people around the world were shocked and dismayed to see Nazi imagery displayed in our nation's capital. For the Jewish community and for all Canadians, those images were deeply disturbing. But sadly, of course, this wasn't a standalone instance. Jewish people are encountering threats and violence more and more, both online and in person. This troubling resurgence of anti-Semitism cannot and will not be ignored. And the atrocities of the Holocaust cannot be buried in history. Qu'on soit juif ou non, on a tous l'obligation de nous souvenir des leçons difficiles de l'Holocauste et de les renforcer. On doit aussi continuer de lutter contre la rhétorique haineuse. C'est pourquoi, dans le budget déposé il y a 3 semaines, on a annoncé notre intention de soutenir le renouvellement du Sarah et Chaim Neuberger Holocaust Education Center à Toronto et la construction d'un nouveau musée de l'Holocauste à Montréal. Ce sont des institutions importantes qui permettent de préserver et de raconter l'histoire de l'Holocauste afin que les jeunes générations puissent apprendre et comprendre la vérité sur ce qui s'est passé. We're also providing ongoing funding for Canada's Special Envoy on preserving Holocaust remembrance and combating antisemitism, a role currently extremely well held by your friend and mine, Erwin Koffler. And we have tabled a proposal that would amend the criminal code to prohibit denying or downplaying the Holocaust. This sends a clear message that this pernicious form of hatred and disinformation has no place in Canada. I know that each and every one of us stands firm in the belief that truth must always resonate deeply and strongly and be amplified at every turn by all of us. On doit continuer de travailler ensemble chaque jour pour honorer les victimes de l'Holocauste, raconter leur histoire et protéger les droits et libertés de tous, quelle que soit leur religion, leur tradition ou leur pays d'origine. We must make sure that never again truly means never again. Merci beaucoup.
I'm now very, very pleased to call in a good friend, Minister of Housing, Diversity and Inclusion, Ahmed Hussen.
Thank you, Shimon, for the introduction. Bonjour tout le monde. I'm always honored to join everyone here at the National Holocaust Memorial to mark Yom HaShoah. Today we take the time to remember the 6 million Jews, including the Jewish disabled, who were brutally murdered, and reflect on the countless others who are survivors of the Nazi regime. Ces actes de violence horribles ne doivent jamais être oubliés et nous avons la responsabilité d'écouter les survivants et de veiller à préserver leur histoire. To honor the memory of the survivors and to combat anti-Semitism, hatred, and racism at home and abroad, we are proud to reappoint the Honorable Erwin Koffler as Canada's Special Envoy on preserving Holocaust remembrance and combating anti-Semitism. The work of Special Envoy Koffler is incredibly important. And as Prime Minister Justin Trudeau just said, we're pleased to be providing an additional $5.6 million over 5 years to support the work of the Special Envoy's incredibly important work and office. Preserving the truth of the survivors also includes ensuring that we have the places that will hold these stories over the years to come. C'est pourquoi nous contribuons à 20 millions pour soutenir la construction du nouveau musée de l'Holocauste à Montréal et 2,5 millions pour le Centre Sarah and Chaim Neuberger Holocaust Education, which is why we're providing $20 million to support the construction of the new Holocaust Museum in Montreal and $2.5 million for the Sarah and Chaim Neuberger Holocaust Education Center. These are important steps to ensuring that we protect the facts, but there's still those who deny what happened, and that is completely unacceptable. We're proposing amendments to the criminal code which will also prohibit denying or downplaying the Holocaust in Canada, because what happened was real. And we will never stop telling the stories of those lost and those who survived. And we take the time to remember the many lives lost and acknowledge the courage of those who survived. We must also recognize that there are forces that continue to seek to divide us. Jewish communities in Canada and around the world are facing a frightening rise in antisemitism. This is unacceptable, and as a society, we must condemn this violence and continue to stand firmly against it collectively. The millions who were lost will never be forgotten. Nous continuerons à raconter leur histoire. We will keep telling their stories. We will keep remembering them. We owe this to the victims and to the survivors. Thank you.
So as Minister Hussen was speaking, I got a little insight into why I have two chambers in my heart. Because as I'm looking from here, I see an individual who has tremendous commitment to our community, Minister Marco Mendicino. And so one chamber of my heart is filled with affection and gratitude for his friendship. And Ahmed, the other chamber, is to reflect the closeness that has grown between us and you, not just during your political career, but well before, when you partnered with the Jewish community through our predecessor organization, Canadian Jewish Congress, and really built up a special relationship that I am so grateful to internalize personally. Thank you for your commitment, for your support, for your friendship, and I look forward to doing so many important things together over the coming years. And I speak too much, so the program designers have insisted that we pass the baton back to the proper MC, and it gives me just one quick opportunity to acknowledge Lawrence, you and your partner, Joel Diener, have done remarkable work and tirelessly have promoted the transformation of this place into something living and dynamic as a testament to the past, as well as a call for the future. So on behalf of everybody here, I thank you for all of your efforts and wish you strength. You may go from chayil to chayil going forward.
Thank you very much for that, Shimon. And I think if Minister Hussen continues to come here, as he's been now on several occasions, he's come to the National Holocaust Monument, eventually he's going to get to the point where Chem becomes Chaim. אנחנו רוצים להזמין את כבוד אמבסדור רונן הופמן לדבר בשם שגרירות הישראלית. Shalom, Ambassador Hoffman. Please welcome.
Right Honorable Prime Minister Trudeau, ministers, MPs, ambassadors, survivors, friends, dignitaries, and guests. I'm honored to be here with you all on Yom HaShoah, gathered in this grand and important monument to commemorate the millions of victims as well as the survivors of the Holocaust. Thank you all for being here today, and thank you, Prime Minister, for your efforts and achievements in combating anti-Semitism. Under your leadership, Prime Minister, for the first time in Canadian history, the government formally adopted the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism. This was a significant step forward in a world where anti-Semitism continues to harm our community. Yom HaShoah is Israel's National Holocaust Remembrance Day. This day serves to commemorate the 6 million Jews, a third of our people, who were systematically murdered by the Nazi regime's horrendous actions during the Second World War. On this day, we also remember the millions of other minorities who were also murdered alongside Jews. We remember and we must never forget. Whether you are slightly educated about the atrocities of the Holocaust or are a scholar in its history, the scale of evil demonstrated by the Nazis never ceases to take my breath away. Commemorating the lives lost in the Holocaust and the ones that were forever changed is not and cannot be done only by designated days each year. The memory of the Holocaust must be examined and upheld every day. Excuse me. Standing up in the face of growing Holocaust denial and distortion is paramount to shaping its historical legacy for generations to come. At the top of my priorities as Ambassador of Israel to Canada is cooperation with government, community, and grassroots organizations to promote Holocaust remembrance education and combat contemporary antisemitism, which is unfortunately ongoing. I'm proud to be here as a representative of the State of Israel, a country founded on the premise of Jewish state. As a thriving liberal democracy, Israel stands as the greatest symbol to the notion of never again. Never again will Jews not be able to defend themselves, and never again will Jewish people have no place to turn to in times of need. Israel is and will always be a safe haven for Jews. It must be clear to everyone that those people in our society who continuously deny the right of the State of Israel to exist as a Jewish state are not promoting some diplomatic or political idea, but rather are continuing the cause of those who wished to exterminate the Jewish people, only now in a modern context. Thank you for your commitment and support to remembering the Holocaust and the notion of never again. In the wise words of Anna Frank, what is done cannot be undone, but one can prevent it happening again. Thank you. Merci.
Toda Rabbi, Ambassador. I'd like to call upon Michael Levitt, the President and CEO of Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Center, to provide remarks. Michael, please come forward.
Honored, distinguished guests from near and far. First, I want to acknowledge and pay tribute to the Holocaust survivors we're fortunate to have with us here today, along with their spouses, children, grandchildren, and perhaps even great-grandchildren. Their presence is a poignant reminder of the importance of Yom HaShoah and our responsibility to remember this dark chapter of our history. As a former parliamentarian, I'm grateful to be back in Ottawa, in particular at this evocative monument to commemorate the 6 million Jews murdered by the Nazis. According to Jewish tradition, we are compelled to remember our past and find meaning in it. Given the enormity of Jewish loss in the Holocaust and its enduring emotional scar, we will never forget what the Nazis did to our people. We hope others will also remember it too and learn the lessons from this painful and unspeakable tragedy. Standing here before you today, I take great pride that Canada is so committed to Holocaust remembrance and education. A major reason is because of the survivors who, after suffering unthinkable adversity in Europe, rebuilt their shattered lives here in our great country. Their strength, resilience, and willingness to share their deeply personal and harrowing stories has been a gift and a source of inspiration to all Canadians. Throughout my life, I've learned so much from Holocaust survivors for whom I have so much respect and admiration. The world would be a much better place if people were to learn from the experiences and words of survivors, such as the late Elie Wiesel, a well-known author and Nobel Peace Prize laureate. What he had to say in the aftermath of the Holocaust is as relevant today as it was during his lifetime. Allow me to share with you just one brief passage which should guide all of us in the face of injustice. We must always take sides. Neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim. Silence encourages the tormentor, never the tormented. Sometimes we must interfere. When human lives are endangered, when human dignity is in jeopardy, national borders and sensitivities become irrelevant. Wherever men or women are persecuted because of their race, religion, or political views, that place must, at that moment, become the center of the universe. Such are the lessons of the Holocaust. We ignore them at our own peril. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Dr. Agnes Klein, a Holocaust survivor. She continues to work at Health Canada as director of the Centre for Evaluation, Radiopharmaceuticals, and Biotherapeutics. Mostly, she's proud to be a mother of 3 and a grandmother of 4. Dr. Agnes Klein.
L'honorable Premier ministre Justin Trudeau, Ministre Hussen, Ambassador Hoffman, Mesdames et Messieurs, the Holocaust was and continues as an event with unique features amongst all genocide events. It was planned meticulously and systematically and deliberately executed. The Nazis also kept records of those who were in the concentration camps and where the numbers tattooed on people treated like cattle became their identifiers. It was a deliberate and cruelly executed depersonalization exercise. Cependant, c'est ce qui a aidé la Croix-Rouge à développer et publier périodiquement une liste des survivants après la libération des camps de concentration. Moi, on me considère une enfant cachée. Ma famille, nous étions tous cachés. Maman, ma sœur et moi, après avoir essayé plusieurs villages, dans un village qui nous a reçus. Our father was continuously on the run. With the rare exceptions of those who had migrated to South America at the end of World War I, or those who ended up in Israel before its independence, both I and my late husband, who was a concentration camp survivor, Auschwitz, Dachau, Buna Monowitz, both lost large families, many of whom we never got to know in the way we would have wanted to. At least I saw our grandparents twice. My sister never had the benefit of knowing any of her grandparents. That is only some of the personal loss, the memories, and the constant fear that hounded both of us for many years afterwards. And we were some of the lucky ones. Equally, but even more unmeasurable, is the loss of talent, brain power, and education that the world was unable to benefit from. Discrimination abounded everywhere. Those who were fortunate to make it helped to rebuild a nation after the war that is proud of who we are and our contribution to humankind. I shudder over and over when I think of the lost talent, the lost contribution that could have been made to further the human condition. Never again, and no child anywhere should ever have to grow up again under such circumstances. I would hope we would have learned something from history, and sometimes I still despair.
think that's the music. No? All right. One of the smartest moves I ever made, and my wife is here, so I want to make sure that I'm very clear about this. The smartest move I ever made was my wife. But right up there in the top 10 was picking up the phone and calling Annette Wildgoose. Joel Diener and I had talked about revitalizing this monument, and my thought was to contact Annette Wildgoose to try and help make that happen. And she has done everything and beyond ever since. She's here today and wearing many hats. One of them is as a child of a survivor, a representative of second generation, and I'd ask Annette to come forward and say a few words.
Thank you, Lawrence, et merci beaucoup. Le très honorable Monsieur Trudeau, Premier ministre du Canada, l'honorable ministre Hussen, Monsieur Blanchette, ambassadeur Hoffman et ainsi tous les invités présents, bonjour mesdames et messieurs. C'est avec un grand honneur que je suis ici devant vous pour parler un peu de la famille de ma mère, de toute sa famille. Ma mère, Alice Meister, a été la seule survivante de l'Holocauste. The following words explain so eloquently my sentiments this morning and were written by Rabbi Jonathan Sachs from his book Morality, Restoring the Common Good in Divided Times, quite appropriate for today. History is about facts. Memory is about identity. History is about something that happened to someone else, not me. Memory is my story, the past, who made me who I am, of whose legacy I am the guardian for the sake of generations yet to come. Without memory, there is no identity, and without identity, we are mere dust on the surface of infinity. Ma mère, Alice Meister, est née à Leipzig, en Allemagne, en 1920. A total of 15 members of her immediate family are no longer with me. They all perished in Auschwitz and Majdanek death camps. My mum would leave Hamburg aboard the St. Louis ship in 1939. In her memoirs, she wrote, "I have no idea why I would be the only one to survive. All I can say, it was as if a secret hand was guiding me throughout my life." I have read it many times. It is my honor to read the name of my family for the first time in public. They were all deported from Leipzig on the 10th of May, 1942. My grandfather, Moritz Meister, 51 years old, Auschwitz. My grandmother, Herta Meister, 50 years old, Majdanek. My aunt Edith, 19 years old, Majdanek. My uncle Alphonse, 17 years old, Auschwitz. My uncle Siegbert, Ziggy, 9 years old, Majdanek. My aunt Ruth, 8 years old, Majdanek. My mother's aunts, Charlotte and Gertrude Meyer, unknown. My mother's uncles and aunts, Julius and Hannah Rubelmeister, 52 years old, and Max and Lena Rubelmeister, 49 years old, unknown. And my mother's cousins, Oscar, 26, Fanny, 23, and Sulamith Rubelmeister, 18 years old, unknown. Merci beaucoup.
Our next speaker is Annie Khazzam. She's a McGill student, and she recently completed the March of the Living and was moved and inspired by it. Annie, come on up and speak with us, please.
Thank you, Lawrence. I believe that it is easy for us to think that we are better than those who came before us, that we won't commit the same mistakes, and that we would never turn a blind eye towards discrimination, hatred, and genocide. Pourtant, voilà où nous en sommes aujourd'hui. Nous voyons une montée terrifiante d'antisémitisme dans le monde entier. Une guerre sanglante et violente en Ukraine, l'oppression déplorable des musulmans ouïghours, une crise civile en Éthiopie, et la liste continue. It is obvious that the world still has a lot to learn. We still have a lot to learn. I ask the politicians present today to help lead our country, Canada, to be a light amongst nations. I ask the people here today, every single one of you listening, to reflect and to think, if I were in need of help, if I were present currently in one of those crises, what would I be wanting right now? Alors, allons-y et agissons. Parlons-en. N'oublions pas. Faisons don de notre temps, énergie et plus si nous le pouvons. Rallions nos amis, notre famille, nos voisins. Car cela prend plus que nous, que moi, que chacun d'entre vous pour faire une vraie différence. Today, on Yom HaShoah, has me reflecting on my own experience on the March of the Living. I am remembering the thousands upon thousands of black shoes from Holocaust victims, the masses of human hair which looked frighteningly like my own, the mounds of torn artificial limbs, the desperate nail gratings on the walls of the gas chambers, and the mountains of human ashes larger than this monument. And I tell myself, never again, never again, never again. It's up to us, to you, to me, à nous tous, for it to never happen again. Thank you. Merci. Toda rabba.
Thank you so much, Anne. I'd like to invite Judy Young-Drake, Holocaust survivor and member of the Center for Holocaust Education and Scholarship, CIJA, to read an address from the Honorable Erwin Koffler, Special Envoy on Holocaust Remembrance and Combating Antisemitism. Judy?
Professor Koffler very much regrets not being able to be with us here today. I am very honored to be able to bring his message to you on this Yom HaShoah. May I begin by commending all the partners who organized this timely and significant Yom HaShoah event. En effet, on s'est réunis en ce jour de souvenir afin de nous rappeler notre devoir de mémoire, témoigner, réfléchir et transmettre par l'enseignement et l'action les leçons universelles de l'Holocauste. As Holocaust survivor and Nobel Peace Laureate Elie Wiesel put it, Elie Wiesel again, the Holocaust was a war against the Jews in which not all victims were Jews, but all Jews were targeted victims. Victims of the demonization and dehumanization of the Jews as prologue and justification for mass murder. The mass murder of 6 million Jews, 1.5 million of whom were children. This is not a matter of abstract statistics, but as we say at these moments of remembrance, to each person there is a name, to each person there is an identity, each person is a universe, reminding us of the Talmudic teaching, if you save a single life, it is as if you had saved the entire world. And so the abiding first lesson, we are each, wherever we are, the guarantors of each other's destiny. And the second, ce qui conduit à la seconde leçon, le danger et la menace existentielle de l'antisémitisme, dont le camp de mort d'Auschwitz est le message et la métaphore. 1.3 million people were deported to the death camp Auschwitz. 1.1 million of them were Jews. Let there be no mistake about it. I'm sorry. Let there be no mistake about it. Jews were murdered at Auschwitz because of anti-Semitism, but anti-Semitism did not die at Auschwitz. It remains the bloody canary in the mineshaft of global evil today, toxic to democracies and an assault on our common humanity. May I close with a word to Holocaust survivors. For you endured the worst of inhumanity and somehow found the resources of your own humanity, the courage to go on, to rebuild your lives as you build the communities in which you have made an enduring contribution. And so, may this day be not only an act of remembrance, which it is, but a remembrance to act on behalf of our Jewish peoplehood and on behalf of our common humanity. Merci, thank you, toda rabba, köszönöm, vielen Dank.
Well, that's a lot shorter than Erwin would have been if he was here, for those of you who know him. But thank you very much, Judy, and please pass along our thanks to Erwin for his always inspiring words. I want to welcome our next speaker, who is Ian Sherman, who's listed here as the chairman of the Jewish Federation of Ottawa. But I have to tell you that this is an Ottawa superstar in our community. So he's not only involved in the Jewish Federation, but in just about every other major charity in this city. And we're very glad that he was able to come today to speak with us. Ian Sherman, please.
Right Honorable Prime Minister Trudeau, Minister Hussen, Ambassador Hoffman, dignitaries, Holocaust survivors, partner organizations, and all those who are gathered here today. On Yom HaShoah, we pause, remember, and commemorate one of the darkest chapters of human history. The 6 million Jews who lost their lives in the Holocaust, as well as the survivors and liberators among us. Throughout the world, we take a moment to reflect on the past and mark National Holocaust Remembrance. As chair of the board of directors of the Jewish Federation of Ottawa, I am deeply moved to stand with Jewish federations, Jewish community centers, synagogues, interfaith partners, Holocaust institutions, and communities across the globe as we honor the memory of the victims and pay tribute to Holocaust survivors who inspire us with their resilience and enduring words, including messages of hope. This is our sacred obligation. 80 years ago, on a cold day in January, top-ranking Nazis gathered in a house by a lake on the outskirts of Berlin at Wannsee to discuss the exploitation and mass murder of the Jewish people. Under the euphemism of the final solution, children would die alongside their parents and grandparents. No one would be spared. 3.5 years ago, my wife Randy and I, together with members of the community, 35 members, led by our beloved Rabbi Scher, traveled on a journey to remember. From Berlin, at the house of the Wannsee Conference, through Poland, and then to Israel. We bore witness to the extreme darkness of several concentration and death camps. This was not only a journey to remember and a journey to nourish both existing and new friendships. It also became a journey that transformed my emotions and changed my life. The experience crystallized my understanding as to why we must always speak out against antisemitism and hatred in all of its pernicious forms. The legacy of the Holocaust must always remind us that silence in the face of bigotry is complicity. At the same time, we must all be so grateful for the blessings in Canada to practice our religion and culture and free from persecution and punishment. We just celebrated Passover. Let us continue to embrace our heritage and our holidays, where we pray for the triumph of light over darkness, hope over despair, and life over death. These are our sacred obligations: to honor the memory of those who perished, to relentlessly fight against Holocaust denial and antisemitism, to lead with actions perpetuating dignity and justice, to protect our values of compassion, tolerance, and inclusiveness, and to pledge to do more than simply promise, never again. Remembrance without action is an empty ritual. Thank you.
It's now my pleasure to invite Rabbi Idan Scher to introduce the Torah Day and Ottawa Jewish Community School students and to read Rabbi Sachs' prayer in English and French. Rabbi, please come forward.
I remember shortly before that trip that Ian Sherman mentioned, I watched testimony after testimony from survivors of the Nazi concentration camps, of the Nazi death camps. I watched and I heard a survivor share a scene that had remained etched in his mind and on his heart for the rest of his life. A scene that would awaken him in cold sweats and terror in the middle of the night. It was in Auschwitz, where 1 million Jews were killed. 10,000 Jews killed on average every day. That's an entire Jewish community that would be killed day after day at that concentration camp. Anyways, he saw a little boy being ripped from his mother's arms. His mother was sent to one side. She would stay alive to work, at least for the time being, and the little boy would be sent to the gas chambers immediately. And as he was ripped from his mother's arms, he yelled out, "But Mommy, wasn't I always a good boy?" And the last words the mother ever uttered to her beautiful son were, "My darling child, please know you were always a good boy. You were the best boy." The Holocaust happened because hate, discrimination, bigotry, evil, megalomania was left unchecked. And it happened to 6 million innocent people, including 1.1 million children, including this angelic child ripped from his mother's arms. In these testimonies, I heard a theme over and over again. I heard how as people were being led to the gas chambers, going to their deaths, they knew what was about to happen to them. And the scene that would play out, sometimes there would be silence, but oftentimes there was screaming and yelling. Some of those screams were screams of fear, but more often than not, those being herded, forced to their deaths, were yelling to all of those who were not yet chosen to die, "Remember us. Tell the world what you witnessed. Tell the world what happened." Since the Holocaust, we have had many survivors who, in a display of the greatest courage and bravery, have shared what they witnessed, what they experienced with the world. But every year that goes by, there are less people with numbers tattooed on their arms, less people who can share a first-hand account, and more, the responsibility falls on each and every one of us to take that baton and stand as passionate witnesses to remind the world what happens when hate is allowed free rein. And today, on Yom HaShoah 2022, we look to all of you, specifically all of you sitting in rows 9 through 12, our next generation, the students in our community, students all over the world. We look to you to ensure that our world continues to honor the last words of so many. Remember us, tell the world what happened to us, stand as our witnesses and the guardians of our stories. In that spirit, I invite students from our two local Jewish day schools, the Ottawa Jewish Community School and Torah Day School of Ottawa, to please come up and lead us in a prayer written by Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, the late Chief Rabbi of the British Commonwealth, for Yom HaShoah. I invite Ella Green of Torah Day School to lead us in the prayer in English, and Maya Spanglet of the Ottawa Jewish Community School to lead us in French.
A prayer for Yom HaShoah, composed by the Chief Rabbi Lord Sachs. Today, on Yom HaShoah, we remember the victims of the greatest crime of man against man, the young, the old, the innocent, the 1.5 million children starved, shot, given lethal injections, gassed, burned, and turned to ash because they were deemed guilty of the crime of being different. We remember what happens when hate takes hold of the human heart and turns it to stone. What happens when victims cry for help and there is no one listening? What happens when humanity fails to recognize that those who are not in our image are nonetheless in God's image? We remember and pay tribute to the survivors who bore witness to what happened and to the victims so that robbed of their lives, they will not also be robbed of their deaths. We remember and give thanks to the righteous of the nations who saved lives, often at risk of their own, teaching us how in the darkest night we can light a candle of hope. Today, on Yom HaShoah, we call on you, Almighty God, to help us hear your voice that says in every generation, do not murder, do not stand idly by the blood of your neighbor, do not oppress the stranger. We know that whilst we do not have the ability to change the past, we can change the future. We know that whilst we cannot bring the dead back to life, we can ensure their memories live on and their deaths were not in vain. And so, on this Yom HaShoah, we commit ourselves to one simple act, Yizkor, remember. May the souls of victims be bound in the bond of everlasting life. Amen.
Aujourd'hui, à Yom HaShoah, nous nous souvenons des victimes du plus grand crime de l'homme contre l'homme. Les jeunes, les vieux, les innocents, le 1,5 million d'enfants, affamés, abattus, intoxiqués au gaz, qui ont reçu une injection létale, brûlés et transformés en cendres, parce qu'ils ont été jugés coupables du crime d'être différents. Nous nous souvenons de ce qui se passe lorsque la haine s'empare du cœur humain et le transforme en pierre. De ce qui se passe lorsque les victimes crient à l'aide et qu'il n'y a personne qui écoute. Que se passe-t-il quand l'humanité ne reconnaît pas ceux qui sont à son image et qui le sont néanmoins dans l'image de Dieu? Nous nous souvenons et rendons hommage aux survivants qui ont témoigné de ce qui s'est passé, et nous nous souvenons et rendons hommage aux victimes dont on a volé la vie afin que leur mort ne leur soit pas volée aussi. Nous nous souvenons et rendons grâce aux personnes justes de toutes les nations qui ont sauvé des vies, souvent au péril de la leur. Ils nous enseignent que même dans la nuit la plus sombre, nous pouvons voir une lueur d'espoir. Aujourd'hui, à Yom HaShoah, nous te demandons, Dieu Tout-Puissant, de nous aider à entendre ta voix qui dit à chaque génération, ne tuez pas, ne restez pas les bras croisés devant le sang de votre prochain. N'opprimez pas l'étranger. Nous savons que même si nous n'avons pas la capacité de changer le passé, nous pouvons changer l'avenir. Nous savons que même si nous ne pouvons pas ramener les morts à la vie, nous pouvons nous assurer que leurs souvenirs perdurent et que leurs morts n'ont pas été vaines. Et donc, sur ce Yom HaShoah, nous nous engageons à un acte simple. Yizkor, souvenez-vous, que les âmes des victimes soient liées par le lien de la vie éternelle. Amen.
Ella and Maya, thank you so much. At this point, I invite members of our local Ottawa Jewish community, members of our community who survived the Holocaust, to please come up to light the Yizkor flames, the light of eternal memory, remembering the 6 million Jews murdered in the Holocaust. I call up Ellie Bolagraf, Judy Young-Drach, Vera Gara, Dr. Agnes Klein, David Moskovich, and Ruth Katz. At this point, we'll ask everybody with a candle. And please join as we recite the Kaddish. Everyone may please stand, may please rise as we recite the Kaddish, the memorial prayer for the victims, the 6 million that perished in the Shoah. Will be led. Yiskadal v'yiskadash shemei Rabbi v'yalma divrach chirusei v'yamlich malchusei v'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chaye dechol beis Yisrael v'agala uv'izman kariv v'imru Amen. Yehi Shemei Rabba Mevarach Le'olam U'Le'omei Olmaya Yisbarach V'yishtabach V'yispa'ar V'yisromam V'yisnaseh V'yishadar V'yisaleh V'yishalal Shemei Dekudsha Berichu Le'ela Min Kol Berchasa V'shirasa Tushbechasa V'nechemasa Ta'amiran V'imru Amen. Shalom Rabba Min Shemaya V'chayim Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael. Amen. Oseh Shalom Bimromav Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael. V'imru Amen. Thank you. Hannah Senesh was a poet and one of the 37 Jewish recruits from what would in several years become the State of Israel, who were parachuted into Yugoslavia during the Second World War to assist anti-Nazi forces and ultimately assist in the rescue of Hungarian Jews about to be deported to the German death camp at Auschwitz. Hannah Senes was arrested at the Hungarian border. She was imprisoned and tortured, but refused to reveal details of her mission. She was eventually executed by firing squad. She was 23. She wrote a poem titled A Walk to Caesarea that has become a song often known as Eli Eli. At this point, I invite the Tamir Community Choir under the direction of Rachel Oyster and with keyboard accompaniment by Aviva Lightstone to sing this powerful song and then lead us in the Canadian national anthem and Hatikva, the Israeli national anthem.
can resume your seats. Thank you. Thank you, Tamir Community Choir. J'aimerais remercier toutes les personnes qui sont ici aujourd'hui pour leur participation and all of you who are watching on live stream. Thank you to my fellow members of the National Holocaust Monument Committee, Joel Diener, for bringing us to this place. Hear, hear. Annette Wildgoose, Rabbi Idan Scher, Harry Present, and Ellie Lipschitz. The media is invited to contact the Wizard, Vice President Communications and Marketing at CIJA. You're welcome to speak to Martin afterwards for any follow-ups. And a couple of other housekeeping matters. One is that you should be aware that there is a wonderful exhibit just across the way at the museum, the War Museum. It's called How It Was Humanly Possible, sponsored by Yad Vashem. I want to ask everyone to remain in their seats while the speakers will be exiting to their right in just a moment, and want to close with one more Elie Wiesel quote, which is, "To forget the dead would be akin to killing them a second time, and so we remember." Merci beaucoup. Thank you. Toda rabah.